I sat cross-legged on the thin mattress in the bedroom I grew up in, surrounded by curling posters and chipped paint, feeling more like a stranger than a daughter. My laptop glowed beside me, its screen displaying one stark line: college savings, $46,320.12. My fingers hovered, trembling, over the transfer button. Downstairs, voices cracked through the floorboards, Dad shouting at the kitchen table, Mom quietly crying in the next room. Another desperate family meeting about overdue bills. The mailbox had become a graveyard of debt notices. They hadn't asked me directly. Not yet. But the weight of unspoken expectation was suffocating, like waiting for thunder after a flash of lightning. Just 6 months ago, I was pinning dorm decor ideas, scheduling campus visits, texting potential roommates. I'd worked toward this for years, escaping this stifling town, being the first in my family to go to college. But ever since Dad lost his job and Mom maxed out every credit card, those dreams had quietly withered into background noise. "Lily, come down here," Dad barked from the bottom of the stairs. His tone was sharp, final. The kind that crushed any room for resistance or dreaming. I swallowed hard and shut the laptop. It's just money, I told myself. College could wait a year or two. I'd rebuild the fund. My dreams could pause. Family couldn't. In the kitchen, Mom was still dabbing at her red eyes with a balled-up tissue, while Dad paced like he was trapped. The table was buried under envelopes stamped in urgent red letters. "You're nearly 18, Dad said, skipping past any pleasantries. "You live here. You need to contribute." Mom gave a trembling sigh. "We never wanted to ask, sweetheart. But we're drowning." I gave a slow nod, my heart thudding so loudly it muffled my thoughts. "I'll help," I murmured. "I'll figure something out." I didn't bring up the fund. Not then. Some stubborn part of me still hoped they'd remember what it was for. That they'd stop me. That they'd tell me my future mattered. But no one did. No one even looked at me long enough to see the uncertainty in my eyes. That night, while they sat downstairs laughing too loudly at reruns they'd memorized, I drained my entire college savings into their joint account. $46,320.12, gone in less than 5 minutes. I stayed on my bedroom floor afterward, staring blankly at the laptop, numb, like I'd carved out part of myself and handed it over without flinching. Still, I clung to the belief that it was worth it. Family comes first. That's what we always said. But the next morning, Dad slammed his coffee mug onto the table hard enough to make it rattle. "That's it," he snapped after checking the bank app. 46 grand? That won't even touch what we owe." I stared at him, my mouth dry. "That's everything I had. It was everything to me," I said, my voice barely audible. His gaze turned ice cold. "Then maybe you should have tried harder. Gotten scholarships. Thought about us first." His words landed like punches, brutal, unexpected. "You're dead to us," he spat, the vein in his forehead pulsing, his voice bouncing off the cracked tiles. Mom didn't speak. She just stared at the paperwork like if she ignored me long enough, I'd disappear on my own. I didn't say goodbye. Just walked out the door. I kept walking, past the gas stations, the shuttered plants, the crumbling porches with paint peeling like old scabs. The whole town looked exhausted, like it had been holding its breath for years, hoping something would change. I sat on a weathered bench outside the post office, tears slipping down my face in silence. It wasn't a dramatic breakdown, just quiet, unwanted tears that blurred everything around me. They were supposed to be proud of me. They were supposed to protect me. Instead, I had torn apart my own future, trying to save theirs. And all I received in return was rejection. That was the first crack. The first time I understood that real love doesn't ask you to destroy yourself for others. It was when the pedestal I had placed my parents on began to crumble. Even then, I knew this was just the beginning. The days after blurred into a hollow routine. Each morning started with the sound of Dad stomping around in the kitchen, barking at Mom as though they were soldiers in a battle neither of them understood. I kept my head down, taking whatever work I could find, waiting tables, running errands, anything to scrape together some cash. The money from my college savings? Gone. But the problems it was meant to solve didn't go away. They only got worse. One evening, after a double shift at the diner, I climbed the porch steps, exhausted. Then I heard the phone ring inside. The shrill sound echoed through the house like a warning siren. I could hear Mom's voice, sharp, anxious. "I told you we're working on it," she snapped into the phone. "I said we'd send something next week." A pause. Then her voice dropped, tight with strain. "No, don't call here again. Please." I froze in the doorway, my sweaty palms clutching the weathered wood. A cold wave of realization washed over me. Collectors. When she finally hung up, I pushed open the door. Mom stood in the living room, shoulders hunched, her phone dangling from her fingers. Her eyes met mine, startled, almost apologetic, but she said nothing. Just slipped the phone into her cardigan pocket and moved toward the kitchen. They hadn't told me everything. Not about the debts. Not about how deep the hole was. I dropped my bag and followed her. "Was that about the bills?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Mom kept wiping an already clean counter. "It's nothing for you to worry about, honey," she said too quickly. "Go get some rest. You've been working hard." I opened my mouth to argue, but stopped. The weight in my chest was growing heavier, but every time I tried to talk about it, it felt like I was sinking deeper. A week later, another call came. This time, I answered it. Lily Reynolds. A deep, uninterested voice crackled through. "This is Allied Collections. We're calling about an overdue balance associated with your address." I froze. I'm not responsible for those debts," I stammered. The man didn't hesitate. "Maybe not legally, but you're listed as a secondary contact. If payment isn't made soon, further action will be taken." I hung up quickly, my hands shaking so much the phone nearly slipped from my grip. Secondary contact? When had they made me that? I stormed into the kitchen, where Dad was slouched in his chair, a beer in one hand, the remote in the other, flicking through channels aimlessly. "Were you going to tell me?" I demanded, my voice trembling. He barely glanced at me. "Tell you what? That you put my name down for your debts. That collectors are calling me now." He grunted, setting his beer down with a thud. "You live here. You're part of this family. It's your responsibility, too." I took a step back, the words stinging harder than any slap. "My responsibility," I whispered. "I gave up my future for you. I gave up college for you." Dad stood up suddenly, towering over me, his face flushed. "You think that makes you better than us? You think you're some kind of saint because you threw a little money around?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Mom appeared in the doorway, looking between us like she had no idea where the train had derailed. "Lily, please," she said quietly. "You're upsetting your father." I let out a bitter laugh. Upsetting him. All I had ever done was clean up their messes, fix their mistakes, and pretend everything was fine. And somehow I was still the bad guy. I grabbed my jacket off the hook by the door. "I'm leaving," I muttered, my voice barely holding together. Dad's voice followed me, sharp and dismissive. "Don't bother coming back if you're going to act like this." The door slammed behind me, the noise rattling through the house. I walked down the darkening street, the streetlights flickering like broken fireflies above me. Each step felt like I was sinking deeper, the weight of their betrayal dragging me down. How could they look me in the eye and still demand more? How could they twist my love, my devotion, into a weapon aimed at my own heart? I collapsed onto a bench outside the gas station, staring blankly at the cracked pavement. This wasn't family. Family didn't tear apart your future and then blame you for what was left of it. I pulled my phone from my pocket and scrolled through old emails from colleges, acceptance letters, scholarships. All the dreams I had thrown away one after another. For what? Another call buzzed through. Unknown number. Without thinking, I answered. "This is Allied Collections," the same monotone voice said. "Final notice before legal action." I hung up immediately, the finality of the words hitting me like a wave. This was more than just overdue bills. It was about trust, love, and how easily both can crumble when money is involved. I leaned back against the bench, gazing at the bruised sky. And for the first time, A thought started to take root, quiet but firm. I'm not saving them again.
Not this time.
And deep down, something inside me began to shift, a change that no amount of guilt or family ties could reverse. The price had already been paid. Now it was time for them to face the consequences. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Dad shouting into the phone again. It was like living in a war zone, where every morning began with a battle. His voice echoed through the thin walls, harsh and angry. I told you we're working on it. Stop calling us. Then Mom's voice floated in, fragile and breaking.
No, please. We need a little more time.
We have family helping us. Family? The word made my stomach twist. I pulled the blanket over my head, squeezing my eyes shut, as if hiding would make it all disappear. The debt, the broken promises, the crushing weight of guilt. When I finally dragged myself downstairs, the kitchen looked like a disaster zone. Bills were scattered across the table, phone cords tangled, sticky notes filled with frantic reminders stuck everywhere. Mom stood at the counter, holding a mug of cold coffee, her face pale and worn. "Lily," she said softly, not even looking at me. "Can you sit down?" The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. That tone never meant good news. I pulled out a chair and sat, the cold wood biting against my skin. She took a deep breath, finally facing me. Her eyes were swollen from crying. "They're threatening legal action," she whispered. "If we don't make a payment soon, they'll garnish our wages. Maybe even take the car." I said nothing. Mom set her mug down with a trembling hand. "We were thinking maybe you could." "No," I interrupted, cutting her off before she could finish. Her lips snapped shut in surprise, as if she hadn't expected me to say no. "I already gave everything I had," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "I don't have anything left." Mom blinked, as if trying to will the reality away. "But you're working now, right? Even a little. Every bit helps." I stared at her, stunned. How is it possible for them to keep asking for more, even when there was nothing left to give? "I'm saving for a small apartment," I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I'm trying to start fresh." Mom shook her head slowly, disappointment flashing across her face. "Start fresh, Lily? We're your family. You don't just walk away from family." I stood up so suddenly that the chair scraped loudly across the floor. "You turned your back on me the moment you drained my future, without so much as a thank you," I snapped. The words hung in the air, thick and heavy. Mom opened her mouth to respond, but the phone rang again, slicing through the tension like a sharp knife. She grabbed the phone without even sparing a glance in my direction. "Hello," she answered, her breath shaky. There was a pause, and then her face crumpled. "No, we can't pay right now," she said, her voice wavering. "But my daughter, she's helping. She's responsible. She'll fix everything." I stood frozen, my heart sinking as I heard her sell my life piece by piece, with every word. When she finally hung up, she turned to me, exhausted but hopeful. "You'll help, right?" I didn't reply. I just walked out the door, without looking back. Outside, the sun was low, casting long shadows across the cracked sidewalk. Everything looked broken. Our house, our lives, even the fading light. I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app. The balance was laughable. Barely enough for 2 months' rent if I watched every penny. I thought about all the extra shifts I'd taken on. Nights spent cleaning tables, bagging groceries, my feet aching from hours on the hard floor. And still, they saw me only as a solution, not as a person. The next day, Mom cornered me again. "I don't understand why the collectors keep calling," she said, wringing her hands, looking more helpless than ever. "You used your college fund to help, didn't you? So why are they still after us?" I stared at her for a long, silent moment. That's when I realized. They didn't understand how money worked. They didn't have a plan. They had taken my savings and thrown it into a pit. Old debts, fees, penalties, everything but a real solution. They thought I could just keep giving. They thought I had an endless supply. I leaned against the wall, my arms crossed tightly. "Maybe," I said slowly, "because no matter how much I give, It'll never fix a broken system. Mom blinked, confusion flashing across her face. Lily, no. I cut her off. You want to know why the collectors keep calling? It's because throwing money at a sinking ship doesn't stop it from sinking. It just delays the inevitable. She opened her mouth to argue, but I raised my hand, silencing her. I'm not a band-aid, I said, my voice trembling with anger and pain. I'm not a loan you expect never to pay back. I'm not your emergency plan every time you mess up. Mom's face crumpled, and she sank into the nearest chair like she couldn't hold herself up anymore. I didn't feel any sense of triumph, just a deep, aching sadness. You're my daughter, she whispered. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I said softly. And you were supposed to protect me, not use me. With those words, a wall that I hadn't even known was still there finally shattered. I turned and walked away, not glancing back. For the first time in my life, I was no longer burdened by guilt that wasn't mine. But even then, I knew this was only the beginning. The real reckoning hadn't even begun. The silence after that confrontation stretched out for days, thick and heavy like a rubber band pulled too tight. At first, it almost felt peaceful. No passive-aggressive remarks from Dad. No guilt trips from Mom. No frantic phone calls from collectors. But underneath the quiet, something was slowly growing. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table filling out job applications on my battered laptop, Dad came home late, smelling of cigarette smoke and frustration. He dropped a stack of envelopes onto the counter, the sound sharp and final. More notices, he muttered, his words bitter, like everything was my fault. I didn't say a word. I just kept typing, the clatter of the keys filling the thick, suffocating silence. Dad cracked open a beer and slouched into a chair, staring at me over the rim of the bottle. You could do more, he said, his voice low and accusing. I closed the laptop slowly, meeting his gaze without flinching. I'm already working 2 jobs, I said calmly. And I gave you everything I had. Dad scoffed, shaking his head like he couldn't believe how selfish I was being. You're living under our roof, eating our food. You think that's free? I blinked, stunned by his audacity. The roof I had helped save. The food I had paid for with the scraps of money I managed to hold on to after covering their bills for months. My hands balled into fists in my lap. I'm not your debt collector, I said, my voice tight with restraint. And I'm not your retirement fund. Dad slammed his beer onto the table, foam spilling over the edge. You ungrateful little brat, he snarled. After everything we've done for you. A bitter laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. Everything you've done for me? I echoed, incredulous. You mean all those years of treating me like a backup plan while Brandon got to mess up without consequences? You mean draining my college fund without a second thought? Dad's face turned crimson, a storm building in his eyes. Get out if you don't like it, he growled. You think you're better than us?
Fine. Leave.
Mom appeared in the doorway, eyes wide, panic evident in her voice. Frank, stop, she pleaded, glancing nervously between me and Dad. But I was already on my feet, heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode from my chest. Fine, I said, grabbing my jacket from the chair. I'm out. I pushed past them, slamming the door behind me. My legs were shaky, but my mind was clear, sharp with the certainty of my decision. I crashed at a friend's place, sleeping on a sagging couch, the air thick with the smell of old pizza and stale beer. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't comfortable, but it was mine. The first real choice I had made for myself in years. The next morning, my phone buzzed constantly. From Mom. Please come back. We can fix this. From Dad. If you're not back by tonight, don't bother showing your face here again. Even Brandon, who hadn't spoken to me in months. Nice job, Lily. Abandoning your family when they need you the most. Real selfish. I deleted them all without a word. Later that afternoon, I sat in a dingy cafe, nursing a lukewarm coffee, when my phone rang again.
Mom.
I stared at the screen for a moment before reluctantly answering. Lily, she said, her voice hoarse from crying. We're in real trouble. I stayed silent, letting the pause hang between us. They're threatening to garnish Dad's wages. Brandon's talking about moving out. We just can't keep up. Still, I didn't speak. Mom sniffled, desperation creeping into her voice. "You're still our daughter," she whispered. "You owe us." I closed my eyes, pressing my fingers to my temples. "I don't owe you my future," I said slowly, my voice firm. "I don't owe you my peace of mind. I gave you everything I had." "But we're family," she murmured. I opened my eyes, my heart heavy but resolute. "Family isn't about using someone until they've got nothing left to give," I said quietly. "It's about supporting each other. You stopped being family when you started making me responsible for your mistakes." There was a long, painful pause, and then a small, broken voice. "What are we supposed to do?" I exhaled, staring out the window at the busy street below, the world unaware of the battle raging inside me. "I don't know," I admitted. "But what I do know is this. I'm done trying to fix what I didn't break." I hung up before she could respond. For the first time, I chose myself. And even though guilt gnawed at me, something deeper, something stronger, began to grow inside me. Freedom. The days that followed were eerily quiet. No phone calls. No texts. No desperate voicemails full of guilt or accusations. For a while, I let myself believe they had finally realized I wasn't coming back. But hope is a dangerous thing. It was a Tuesday afternoon when my phone buzzed again. Not a call this time, but a text. From Mom. "Please come by. We need to talk. It's important." Against my better judgment, I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the delete button. But something inside me, maybe morbid curiosity, maybe a final thread of loyalty, made me stand up, grab my keys, and head out the door. The house looked exactly the same as when I left. The peeling paint, the sagging gutters, the air thick with years of resentment. I knocked once out of habit, then pushed the door open. The tension inside hit me like a physical force. Dad sat rigidly at the kitchen table, arms crossed, his glare sharp enough to cut. Mom paced nervously by the sink, wringing her hands so tightly they looked pale. And Brandon, as usual, lounged on the couch, glued to his phone, too indifferent to even acknowledge my presence. "Lily," Mom said, managing a tight, forced smile. "Sit down." I stayed standing. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice sharp. Dad leaned forward, slamming his elbows on the table. "We need your help," he said plainly. "As family." The words sounded rehearsed, hollow, like an old script. "We've been thinking," Mom added quickly. "You're young. You've got your whole life ahead of you. You could take out a small loan just to help us get back on our feet." A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. "You want me to take on debt now?" I asked, incredulous. "After you drained my savings?" Brandon finally looked up, rolling his eyes in exaggerated indifference. "It's not a big deal," he said lazily. "People take out loans all the time. That's what being an adult is." I turned to face him slowly, anger rising in my chest. "An adult earns their own way," I said, my voice ice cold. "They don't leech off their sister's sacrifices while pretending it's normal." Brandon shrugged, unfazed. Dad's fist slammed onto the table, making everyone jump. "We're your family," he shouted. "You owe us loyalty." I stepped forward, my heart pounding in my chest, the sound deafening in my ears. "No," I said, my voice steady but loud. "You don't get to demand loyalty after betraying trust. You don't get to call it family when all you've ever done is take." Mom's eyes welled up, tears threatening to spill. "Lily, please. We're desperate." I cut her off, the words sharp. "You were desperate months ago when I drained my college fund to save this house," I said. "And you still let the bills pile up. You still spent money on what wasn't necessary. Cable, takeout, Brandon's online shopping, while mortgage payments were ignored." The room fell into silence, thick with guilt and unspoken regret. "You didn't want a solution," I continued, my voice shaking with rage. "You wanted a crutch, a permanent free ride." I pulled my phone from my pocket, swiping to the screenshot I had saved from the collector's website. the foreclosure notice. I turned the screen toward them. "This," I said, my tone sharp, "is the outcome of your choices, not mine." Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. Dad's face drained of color. Even Brandon seemed taken aback, looking at the phone in stunned silence. "You can't just leave us like this," Dad said, his voice hollow. I smiled bitterly. "You abandoned me first," I whispered, "when you decided my future didn't matter more than your own mistakes." I slid my phone back into my pocket, my hands finally steady. "I won't be taking out a loan. I won't be sending money. And I won't be coming back." Mom staggered forward, reaching out as if to grab my arm, but I stepped back. "I'm not doing this to hurt you," I said softly. "I'm doing this because if I don't stop now, there won't be anything left of me to save." For what felt like an eternity, no one spoke. The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed to echo through the silence. Finally, Dad slumped back in his chair, defeated. Mom wiped at her eyes with trembling hands. Brandon muttered something under his breath, but remained glued to his phone. I turned toward the door, my heart aching but lighter than it had been in years. At the threshold, I paused, looking over my shoulder one last time. "You always told me that actions have consequences," I said quietly. "It's time you live with yours." And with that, I stepped outside, letting the door close softly behind me. The air was cool, fresh, and filled with a freedom I hadn't known since I was a child dreaming of a different life. For the first time, it didn't matter if they called. It didn't matter if they begged, blamed, or fell apart. I had drawn my boundary, and this time I wasn't stepping back over it. The days after I left felt disorienting, like waking up in a world where everything had changed, but no one handed me a guide. First came the guilt. It was suffocating, creeping into every quiet moment. Had I done the right thing? Was I being too harsh? Was I wrong to walk away when they were falling apart? Each time my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number, my stomach tightened. I couldn't bring myself to answer. I wasn't ready to hear another accusation, another desperate plea. Instead, I focused on getting through the day. I crashed on a friend's couch for a few weeks, worked long shifts, and saved every penny as if my life depended on it, because, in a way, it did. Eventually, I managed to scrape together enough for a tiny studio apartment on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much: cracked linoleum floors, a stubborn window that refused to open when it rained, and walls so thin I could hear the neighbor's cat sneeze. But it was mine. The first night I spent there, surrounded by secondhand furniture and the lingering scent of old paint, I cried. Not out of sadness, but out of relief. No yelling, no guilt, no crises that weren't mine to fix. Just quiet. Real, precious quiet. I began to rebuild myself, piece by piece. I applied to community college, using grants and scholarships I had hunted down like buried treasure. It wasn't the big university dream I had once envisioned, but it was a start. I worked mornings at a diner, afternoons in a bookstore, and evenings studying in my cramped apartment. I was exhausted all the time, my muscles sore, my mind fried. But for the first time, I was tired for myself, not for someone else's mistakes. Every now and then, the guilt would sneak back in, sharp and cold, whispering that I had abandoned them, that I wasn't being a good daughter. And some nights, when the world was still and silent, I almost let myself believe it. But then I remembered. I remembered sitting at the kitchen table, watching my dreams slip away as unpaid bills piled up. I remembered Dad screaming that I was dead to them. I remembered Mom asking for more, even after I had given all I could. Family isn't supposed to hurt you when you have nothing left. Family isn't supposed to love you only as long as you're useful. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't heartless. I had simply chosen myself for the first time in my life. A few weeks after I moved into my new place, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address. No familiar handwriting. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper. House sold at foreclosure. Occupants evicted. No note. No apology. Just cold, undeniable truth. They had lost the house, the one I had drained my future trying to save. The one they thought I would keep saving no matter the cost. I sat on the floor, the letter in my hands, overwhelmed by a flood of emotions. Grief, anger, sadness, a small, bitter sense of vindication, but mostly peace. They had made their choices. And for once, I wasn't the one paying for them. I folded the letter slowly and put it in a drawer. Not to gloat, not to hold a grudge, but as a reminder that sometimes the hardest thing to do is walk away, even when every part of you is screaming to stay. That choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary for survival. And that true love, the kind that matters, should never come at a cost. Now, every morning, I wake up to sunlight spilling across the worn floors of my small apartment, make my coffee and breathe. Not because my life is perfect, not because the pain has disappeared, but because every breath I take is mine. Not borrowed, not owed.
Mine.
And I've learned that, in the end, that's worth more than any house, any savings, any fragile dream built on broken promises. Thanks for watching. See you again in the next video. Stay stunned.